Hello, bonsoir, and welcome to the Get French Football News Show. I'm Nathan Staples, and joining me this evening are Jeremy Smith and Pierre-Paul Bermingham. Ligue gifted out its first piece of silverware at the weekend, and for the first time in a long time, Paris Saint-Germain were not the victors, and that's not even an April Fool's joke. But who claimed glory on Saturday night? All of that, and a look at the Ligue 1 weekend that was after the latest headlines. On Friday night, Lyon got another victory under their belts after the international break with a 1-0 win over Rennes. It was substitute Martin Terrier that gave the away side a vital 3 points as they continue to hold firm in third place. On Saturday, before the showpiece event, Marseille were 2-0 up but ended up 2-2 draws against Angers. A Mario Balotelli brace gave the hosts a sizable lead to see it only slip away with two somewhat controversial penalty decisions, especially the first one, as Thomas Mangoni stealed both of those goals for the away side. In the showpiece event, Strasbourg ended up lifting the Coupe de la Ligue over Guingamp on penalties. 4-1 during those spot kicks gave the Alsace side their silverware, the first since they've reformed a few years ago. On Sunday, the big result happened in Monaco as Caen managed to win for the first time in 2019 as Enzo Crivelli's goal gave them a 1-0 win over the Principality side. That lifts them into the relegation playoff place, condemning Dijon to bottom, who lost 1-0 at home to Nice at the weekend. They were down to 10 men before former player Pierre-Lise Melou scored the goal that earned Nice the win. Elsewhere on Sunday, it was Lille who had to come from 2 goals down at Nantes to win 3-2. All goals coming in the second half, and Valentin Esric had the chance to make it 3-3 in the final moments from the penalty spot, but missed, even though he scored one earlier in the game. Elsewhere on Sunday, Amiens held Bordeaux to a 0-0 draw, while the final game of the Sunday events, at least anyway, as we had one this evening, saw Paris Saint-Germain an inch closer to the league title. They're now 2 wins away from sealing their Ligue 1 crown. The 1-0 win over Toulouse, thanks to Kylian Mbappe. This evening, Saint-Etienne have moved up above Marseille into 4th after they won 2-1 at home to Nîmes. It was Remy Cabet that had cancelled out Antonin Bobichon's early goal, while Robert Beric was the man to grab the late goal with 10 minutes from time to give Les Verts the 3 points. And that's all for now. But to follow all the news in the world of French football, head on over to our website at www.getfootballnewsfrance.com and follow us on Twitter at GFFN. We start this week with that Cup final event on Saturday. And well, we were all pretty looking forward to it, Jez, with it being finally a Cup final that didn't involve Paris Saint-Germain. It was... I hazard to say, a little bit of a damp squib for 120 minutes until we got to an entertaining penalty shootout where many of us predicted that it would be Guingamp that would be the team to come out on top should it get that far. But in the end, amounting too far, and Strasbourg just kept their nerve in those dying minutes of those penalty shootouts.
Yeah, it wasn't a classic, and it's easy to say with hindsight, but maybe we should have known it wouldn't be with one team that's been off form for most of the season, and another one that's been pretty woefully off form for the last couple of months or so. But certainly, I'd say that Guingamp probably could feel, if anyone could feel hard done by, I guess it'd be Guingamp based on the sort of balance of play. There wasn't much in it because there wasn't much going on in general, but I think probably it's fair to say Guingamp had better chances during the match. Kamara, I thought, had a very good match and goal for Strasbourg, and I guess we'll come to it a bit later, but for the most part, a pretty good weekend for goalkeepers. And I guess he and maybe also Lienard with a cheeky Benenka came out as the heroes of the evening. But yeah, it wasn't a classic, but I suppose with PSG not being around, it feels like it's such a rare chance for any other team now to win a trophy that maybe there was a little bit more pressure on both teams than usual, and maybe the pressure and the sort of unfamiliarity of the situation got to them. But all credit to Strasbourg for the season they've had in general, and obviously although they're sort of the bigger team on paper or the bigger club on paper, they've had such a turbulent sort of decade or so, and considering I think it's 8 years ago, something like that, they were in the 5th tier. There's quite an amazing rise back up the football pyramid, and sort of just reward for the way they've gone down to the Dodgemans and back up again, and it's great to see them back in Europe next year.
Yeah, and it's been it was a strange game, really. I felt it felt like a little bit like a modern era heavyweight boxing fight, not given that these teams are two titans in any sense of the form, but in the sense that they were a bit cagey, they were a bit nervous, they were a little bit too worried about the knockout punch, and a little bit too concerned about trying to deliver the one knockout punch that would get them the victory that they needed, and it ended up sort of petering out into a nothing affair until that penalty shootout, where Strasbourg did hold their nerve, Pierre-Paul, and much like Jez said, it's been such a rise for them over the last several years or so, coming from pretty much going out of business and then recovering all the way back to Ligue and showing the ambition they've got, and getting that silverware is something those players are never going to forget.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it means more to them than it would have meant for Guingamp, who have won a couple cup trophies in the last 10 years, even though most of the players now at the club weren't part of that team. Given where Strasbourg have come from, given that they've had an incredible following, I mean, for their fans in particular, who continue to show up to all their matches, even in 5th division, which was just really crazy at the time, and to make it back to the top now, it's really impressive. And they've got a bit of a history now as well with the Coupe de la Ligue, seeing as they won it in 2005 and in 97 as well. So they're kind of specialists in that, I guess, a little bit. It was, I mean, I have to say, during the match, there was really nothing of note. For me personally, coming off a pretty long day, it was hard to fight off sleep, but I suspected the penalties would be at the end of my wait, so I kept on going. There was a lot of flying elbows. That's one thing I noticed in both directions. It was quite a cagey and unadventurous match, and they kind of took it out on each other physically rather than really trying to go and score a goal. I think the referee had some difficulty handling some of those fouls, and maybe should have called them, been a bit more severe earlier on in the game. And then the penalty shootout. Dimitri Liénard, who is a club legend at Strasbourg, who was with them down in the amateur divisions. What an incredible moment for him to score a Panenka, and such a. The Panenka he scored was ridiculous because it was just under the crossbar. And I think he said it after the game. His inspiration was Zidane, and if you remember Zidane's Panenka, which came off the crossbar and in, it was very similar to that one. And exceptional night for the Strasbourg fans. There were 25,000 of them in Lille, and they put on a show. Certainly, the fans of both teams put on a show, and that was enjoyable, I would say.
Yeah, it was terrific to see. The fans really got into the game, and it was like you say, an excellent Panenka. That's exactly what you want to see, not the little dinky chips under the bottles. Because even if the goalkeeper stands still, he's going to struggle for that one. As for Guingamp, really, Jez, after this, it's always not the easiest to lift yourselves up after a cup final. And like you said, they had their chances really, as Strasbourg did as well. Although they were limited, do you feel like that some of those players may think, much like you tend to reflect on after a big game like this, that maybe they should have gone for it more, and given, as we'll come on to in a moment, how results went at the weekend in Ligue 1, that maybe this was a sort of unworthy distraction, that Wednesday becomes even bigger than it was before the game, really, that their focus now shifts to that, and that has just as much importance as the cup final did.
Yeah, I mean, as a Brighton fan, I'm going through sort of similar feelings at the moment. Looking at the chat rooms and the big debate, would you take winning the cup but going down, or that kind of thing? I mean, for me, the most important thing is to stay in the top division. Obviously, a cup's a great bonus, and yeah, it's true that it's something that extremely rarely happens. But you stay at the top and you get the chance to play those top teams more or less week in, week out. And I think Guingamp had to think in those terms as well. I'm not sure you could necessarily say that they didn't go for it. I think they were a little bit hamstrung by the fact that Coco and Dor were both out, which didn't help. But I think just as far as you can, you compartmentalise and you forget about the league position while you're playing the cup final, and then win or lose as soon as that match is over. Now they have to be 100% focused, and obviously the Dijon match did kind of go their way, but the Caen match very much didn't. They have to take the positives out of a very good cup run, out of obviously beating PSG away, which is a huge thing. Beating was it Monaco they beat in the semi-final? My mind's gone blank now. Yeah. So decent results along the way, and they have to take from that belief. Even the fact that you could say again 120 minutes keeping a clean sheet, so they're still maintained their good recent defensive record as well. So they have to take the positives. It's a pity they didn't win, but you could they count a loss on penalties as a draw, so they can notch it down as another unbeaten match and just try to maintain that same form, albeit with the disappointment, and just focus all out on the league now. But I think that they've got the players, they should have the confidence, and they've got the form to do that, even having fallen just short this weekend.
Yeah, and it's a tough one to take whenever you lose a cup final, because nobody ever remembers second place in these sort of. And I'm absolutely certain they'll be gutted that, unlike the Strasbourg players, they don't get those little mini Coupe de la Ligue, which I find really great, to be fair, to a medal. You get to have that on your mantelpiece, the little miniature version of the cup, which I absolutely love. It almost looks like a under-12s football team that have won a trophy rather than professional footballers. But I think we should see it more often. But to each their own, at least. But back to Ligue 1 matters, because as we've briefly touched on there, Pierre-Paul, the result that really affected Guingamp twicefold, really, because they lost the cup final. The disappointment of that is then compounded the fact that they've gone back into the drop zone, because Caen pulled off one of the most unlikely wins of the weekend, although Monaco is still down in those lower positions, that no one really anticipated that the side that haven't won since December would get a victory away from home. But that they've deemed Enzo Crivellier in the goal, and a real stout performance by the defence to keep them out. A great goalkeeping performance as well. Caen managing to lift themselves out. And we thought they were dead and buried last week, but all of a sudden they're resurrecting themselves.
Yeah, I mean, outstanding result. I couldn't believe it when I saw it yesterday. They haven't won in 2019. They're playing against Monaco, who Monaco are still 16th, but they'd only lost one, I believe, since Yardim came back, which was at the end of January. Caen also, well, the other big news about Caen going into that match was that they had this strange kind of putsch situation going on Friday, where Roland Courbis, who is supposedly there as an advisor to the manager, Mercadal, declared he had 100% control over the team, which the club then denied later on in the day, and nobody really knew what was going on, especially because Courbis has done this before at Rennes. So that was just an unbelievable situation, and coming off a 5-0 defeat at home to Saint-Etienne, who would have believed that they could pull off this result? And yeah, I mean, as you said, Brice Samba with a fantastic performance in goal, with some fabulous saves, and Enzo Crivelli with the trademark header off a very nice cross from Faisal Fajr. So
yeah, usurping doesn't sound like Roland Courbis at all, does it? To demand that he's in control of things. But despite that chaos, much anticipated. No, I don't think anyone really anticipated, just that Caen would come out of this with a victory. But at the same time, this is exactly what Caen do. They they lull your senses of security. They go off on a terrible run, and they pick up a win. And you never really know in this sort of game. They've got games against those two sides below them still. They could just slowly nudge out these victories to earn them the playoff spot, or even very quietly, if other teams above them start struggling, even catch one of those if it comes to that.
Yeah, I still think it's going to be between the bottom three. I think that 7-point gap is probably just about enough now. But yeah, it's bizarre. I think we discussed before how over the course of a season you sort of look back and you think, I can't even how did Caen even amass as many as 23 points? I can't imagine them. I can't remember them being capable of winning that many points. But they just seem to win the matches that matter when it counts. And yeah, probably even if they win only 2 more matches the rest of the season, if they're against Guingamp and Dijon, it could be that's enough. But I think they still need more than that. I still think Guingamp certainly are capable of getting more points. But before this weekend, I'd have said that Caen, of all the teams, look completely dead and buried. And although I do think Monaco have been flattering to deceive a bit, even since Jardim came back, I would never have put money on Caen to win that match. And I mean, I guess on balance of play, when you look at it, Samba was absolutely fantastic, and for most of the match, it wasn't Monaco, but it was just one of those matches where, like, however long the match went on, they were never going to score. And at both ends of the table at this stage of the season, you need huge slices of luck as well. And Caen got that. They got their early goal. They sat back and sort of rode their luck a lot at times, but they got those 3 points, and they could be absolutely crucial. It may or may not have the bearing on their confidence. I don't know, but it doesn't matter how you get them at this stage of the season. You just got to get those points. And the fact that there is this relegation spot makes it a lot more exciting. It gives those teams a sort of second chance to play for. And whereas we could have sort of packed up the relegation places weeks ago, it's great that we're still interested, and we've still got all these 3 teams still fighting for that playoff place.
Yeah, and each 3 of them have sat in each of the places in the last 3 weeks. It went from Dijon, Caen, Guingamp to Guingamp, Dijon, Caen to Caen, Guingamp, Dijon. So it just keeps moving around in the last couple of moments. And looking at the fixtures heading into April now, Pierre-Paul, they've got Nîmes away from home, which, Nîmes have been a tough customer sometimes this season, but you're not guaranteed to not score against them, at least, is maybe the best way of putting them. And Angers, we mentioned on the previous show on Thursday, they're a team that tend to play to the level of their opponents. Nice have had some silly results this season, and then they have that double header against Dijon and Guingamp. But it's not completely unquestionable if that gives them a massive boost in confidence that they can maybe try and get some results before that Dijon Guingamp double header, and that could then be absolutely crucial to their survival.
Yeah, I would say at this point, I would make Caen my favorites out of the 3 to claim that playoff spot and maybe hope for safety. But I mean, as you said, things can change so fast down there in the relegation battle. Certainly, I think they have an easier fixture list than Guingamp does, even though there's no easy fixtures and when you're fighting for to stay up. But Guingamp's fixtures, let me just get those up again. In April, they're playing Montpellier, Monaco, Strasbourg again, Marseille, and Nice. And those are all going to be tough matches. And meanwhile, Dijon are in the mood at Dijon is pretty awful right now. I think they've only won 1 or 2 matches at home all season, and they lost again over the weekend. So it's looking a little bit brighter for Caen, but who knows what happens next.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's strange to think that Dijon were such a homer team last season, especially that they've gone almost completely the opposite way this season, really.
Yeah, even at the start of this season, they were top of the league after 3 matches, and they beat Nice 4-0. I mean, they were all the rave, and then I don't know what's happened since then, but it's just gone away completely.
dramatic fall from grace. And much like we say, Guingamp play on Wednesday night. If they get a win, then all of a sudden it moves around again. And just more to the point, I suppose, like we say, there's probably a little bit enough of a buffer for any of the other teams to fall in. But as for Monaco, they'll be really disappointed with this result, won't they? I know it's obviously a great goalkeeping performance, but to lose 1-0 at home against a side that have been so poor of lately and so poor in 2019, it's a reality check really for the upscale they've had under Leonardo Jardim in the past month or so.
Yeah, it's not a good result for them. I know that they haven't really got anything to play for. In theory, they're not entirely safe from relegation, but I think practically they are. And I suppose it's always difficult to motivate yourself for the end of the season when you're more or less safe, and particularly after the disappointing season that Monaco have had. But there's still players there playing for their futures, whether it's at Monaco or elsewhere. And I think that, like I said, I think they've been a little bit. I don't think they've been playing as well as their results would suggest that they have since Jardim's been back. And maybe they've been found out a little. Even Angers away is not an easy match, but they were relatively lucky to come out of that with the draw. Drawing at home to this Bordeaux team isn't particularly impressive either. And then Lille, they got that. Props to them, because Lille are obviously in great form, but they got that very late win there. I think they've been a little bit not overperforming, but I think that the results have been better than the performances suggest. So maybe it was a matter of time before they got found out. But yeah, I certainly didn't expect it to be at home to Caen. And bad luck or not, a couple of shots that came off the woodwork. There was that one at the end that came off the woodwork and hit Samba's arm or back and could have gone anywhere, could easily have gone in. But they shouldn't be relying on that. They should be able to. The team that Jardim is putting out today should be beating this continent, particularly a continent that hadn't won all year, all calendar year. And I think there's still a lot of work to do.
Agreed.
It feels like we maybe inflated it a little bit, but Monaco certainly have some business to do heading into the summer, at least anyway. I think that's where the focus will turn, and a lot of players need to show what they're worth at least. On to some European chases now then, because a lot of the results of the weekend were tougher than expected for a few, and a couple of movers and shakers. And we'll start with Lille, Pierre-Paul, because they went 2-0 down surprisingly to a Nantes side that have been pretty lethargic over the second half of the season, and understandably so in some circumstances. But they were really good for 20 minutes in the second half. They got their 2-goal lead. You thought, okay, this is their chance. But it was a real test of character for Lille to get back into this game. Obviously, they sort of won a penalty as well, but they showed the real character to come back and earn that win that keeps them comfortably in that second position, when if they had tasted defeat in this one, they would have only been a point above Lyon, and that would have been a real chase on. But instead, they come from behind and make sure that they earn a vital 3 points.
Yeah, absolutely. The word character is what I wanted to use to describe that performance. And especially if we look back to the first half of the season, where they were already in second place, performing very strongly. There was a lot of questions about, are they going to be able to carry it on throughout the season? Are they going to have the personality and the strength and concentration to continue obtaining that kind of result? And they've had some tests recently, and none more so than yesterday, going 2-0 down to Nantes, and then turning it around in the space of, I think it was in 7 minutes, they scored all 3 of their goals. And that's coming off of, I'm sure we'll get to the Lyon-Rennes match, which took place on Friday, which Lyon won. And very much the narrative after that match was Lyon was chasing Lille down, and seeing as Lyon was usually so strong at the end of the season, people are starting to anticipate them catching Lille. But they've put a kind of waiting period on that event. If it ever happens, it's not going to be for the next couple of weeks now. And certainly I think there were some silly mistakes from Lille. They gave away 2 penalties. They were fortunate that Valentin Seric missed the second one, which would have made it, which would have been the 3-3 equalizer. So they've certainly got some things to correct. And I think in the first half as well, not everything was working very well. They had to make changes and to take off Araujo and bring on who was it? Was it Leo who came on later? I can't remember. But they responded well, and I would make them favourites to finish second as well.
And Jez, there has been a couple of question marks over Lille over the past couple of weeks. We've mentioned a few times that it felt like Lyon may be able to have the chance at catching them because they weren't pulling up trees in the results, and especially with that defeat to Monaco last time out where they weren't really convincing, and a couple of 1-0 results. I remember against Saint-Etienne, they won in the last moment. It was a known goal that got them over the line against Dijon. A couple of draws before that as well. It was pretty important for them to get back into the groove and score some nice goals as well. And again, Leao's involved, and Pepe gets the penalty, and he sets up the winner. But at the same time, a penalty could have ruptured it all. But I suppose the first one's a little bit questionable for not. I might need to see a couple more angles to absolutely convince me that was even close to being a penalty. But at the same time, it shows that Galtier's not only built an attacking side, but in this late stage of the season where you do sometimes need to grind out results and put in a shift, they're doing it.
Yeah, it feels a bit like we could look back at this weekend as the one that sort of cemented second and third place. I guess we'll come on to Lyon in a bit, but it felt that Marseille slipping up really puts Lyon in a reasonably comfortable position. I think we'll go on to it, but I thought it would be a lot closer at the end of the weekend because I thought they'd really struggle against Rennes and that Marseille should have come away with a win. Instead, they end up with a bigger gap between them. And then Lille as well. It wasn't, not been great shapes of the season, but on paper it wasn't an easy match. And certainly, as you said, similarly to what I said about Monaco, I suppose, I think Lille's results in recent weeks have been better than their performances suggest. And arguably that's still the case, having looked at this non-match. But the difference with this one is, as Pierre-Paul said, that they really showed a lot of character in this one. And again, rode their luck as well, but that's a big part of it. And that's the kind of thing I think that does sort of going forward, as well as the 3 points for this match. It's that kind of thing where you come out of a match like this unscathed and think, this is our season, everything's going well for us. The fates can't touch us, kind of thing. And by the same token, Lyon are going to look at that and think, it looked like we were odds on to only be a point behind, and suddenly we're still 4 points behind. And maybe we're just never going to get this second place. So I think this, I don't know. Lille have still got a couple of their next 2 matches are really tough if they keep playing as shakily as they have been the last month or so. But they've got that nice little cushion to play with, and yes, second place really is theirs to lose now. I think had they lost yesterday, I'd have said Lyon favourites, but I think Lille should be able to push on from this.
It's going to be interesting. I think, like you say, they've got Reims away from home next. That's never an easy game at the moment with the way they're playing. Then they've got a game against Paris Saint-Germain where PSG can win the league with a victory there, which puts a little bit extra on that as well. And then if that comes to pass and they're close to buy at the start of May, they play each other at Lyon as well, which would be a massive game if it does come down to it. And Lyon will be hoping, Pierre-Paul, that it does come down to that because again, they've sort of snuck a result. They were a little bit lucky against Montpellier last week that they could get out with a 3-2 victory. And this game against Rennes, the home side had their chances. Who knew had a especially big one almost a couple of minutes before they did actually score in a nice little move. But more importantly, they'll be happy to get the win, and they'll be happy to have Genesio's, at least under the banner for the rest of the season. And he'll be desperate to get them as high as he can so he can stay in the job.
Yeah, absolutely. And, as we know, as we've been seeing in the past 2 or maybe even 3 seasons under Genesio, it seems that Lyon are particularly good in the games that matter. And we're getting at the time of the year where every match matters a lot. And, as I mentioned, last season, they finished very strongly. They finished with, I think it was 9 wins in their last 10 matches, and they overtook Marseille to obtain Champions League football. The question this year is, are they going to be able to do that again and overtake Lille again. And yeah, they won it. They took their time to get that goal. They suffered a lot. It wasn't always the most interesting match, even though there was good chances here and there. And then in the end, the goal came from Dubois and Terrier, who were substitutes. Well, Terrier was a substitute, and so the fact that he comes on and scores the winning goal, it kind of highlights Genesio's coaching, especially during this time, during which there was, his role as manager has been contested by some of the fan groups, but the club seems ready to comfort him and make him sign for another 2 years. So it's good news for Genesio. And then, of course, they're going to meet again. The same two teams meet again in Lyon this time on Wednesday in the Cup. Is it Wednesday or tomorrow?
It is tomorrow. Tomorrow's game, actually.
And yeah, so I would say Lyon are still favorites in that one, and they have a chance of winning a trophy for the first time in a few seasons now, since 2012, I think. So they'll probably be rather pumped for that as well.
So I suppose the best way to lead a question for you, Jez, and Pierre-Paul set me up perfectly, really, is what would you prioritise as Lyon, really? Is it more important for them to win a cup, or is it more important for them to finish second and have that automatic Champions League place for them?
It goes back to what we were discussing at the start of the programme. I don't know. For Lyon, it's a little bit different because they should be winning or certainly competing for trophies. So if they had to choose between the two, possibly in this case, I would say, and with, I think, third place safe, possibly I would say prioritise the cup. But I just don't think that they should have to make a choice. I think they've got a deep enough squad. Rennes won't be easy, but they've got the home advantage there. I think it would be a massive disappointment if they don't get to the final. Then they can look after, concentrate on the league position, and then they've proven before that in a one-off match, they more than most have got the potential beating of PSG. So if they had to prioritise, I'd say the cup, but I don't think. I think it's a moot point. I don't think it's a question of prioritising one over the other.
Yeah, I suppose it's a bit of a cheeky question for a bigger side to ask for, because they should be competing there anyway. That's their bread and butter, rather than saying that they would have to pick and choose between the two. And we've touched upon it briefly, Pierre-Paul, that Marseille at the same time had a chance if Lyon did slip up to try and close the gap. But if anything, with that result they've got against Angers, that has now dropped them down to fifth after Saint-Étienne's win earlier on today, this evening, really, has pretty much put Scarpa to any Champions League chances. That's got to come as a real disappointment for them, hasn't it?
Yeah, for sure. They're now 8 points behind Lyon, so that's 8 points behind with 8 matches left. That's going to be a difficult gap to catch up. The satisfactions for Marseille, I think, were not very numerous. I mean, obviously, they're delighted that Balotelli has scored again, scored twice this time. That's his first brace. But apart from the goals, it seems that he kind of struggled to truly play with the team. But that, I suppose, is kind of a Balotelli trademark. He gets you his goals when he's on form, but you don't necessarily count on him at other moments in the match. There was some terrible defensive mistakes from Marseille, and the 2 penalties they gave away. I mean, I think you said there was some controversy, maybe, but to me they looked a bit silly.
Yeah, I think Marseille fans yet again might say they're controversial, but in the end they're penalties. But do continue, Pierre-Paul.
Yeah, and now they're down in 5th place. Could be 6th place if Reims beat Strasbourg on Wednesday, and I think that would certainly be a demoralizing blow, not only for the team but also for the fans, who, as we know, play such an important role in Marseille, in the atmosphere in the stadium and so on. And if they were to wake up on Thursday morning and find themselves in 6th place, yeah, I'm not sure they would be feeling very positive going into the next fixtures.
Yeah, and it sounds like it's getting more and more like a summer of upheaval for them, Jez. We've mentioned before that a number of players may be looking at the door, and a number of players may be shown the door more than anything. But now there's reports that there could even be people in the back end showing, not necessarily showing the door, but finding a way out, maybe a better way. As the sporting director Zubizarreta has been linked with Arsenal this evening. It looks like they're sort of second choice over Monchi, who's ended up going to Sevilla. If he does join Arsenal, what's his legacy at Marseille? He came in after being sacked from Barca at 2015. He did a fairly good job there. Some would argue not always the perfect job, but a decent job. But it's a difficult legacy to hold behind. They've not had a lot of money for a fair amount of time on that, Jez, but he's brought in a couple of decent players. It's been a difficult strategy, but nothing that would really inspire Arsenal fans.
No, nothing at all, if you ask me. I think he was overrated as a goalkeeper, and I'm not sure really what he's done as a sporting director. Okay, he did all right at Barcelona, but still the main spine of that team when he was there were Barcelona players born and bred, so he didn't really have to work that hard there. And ask any Marseille fan. Overall, I don't think they've been particularly happy with the transfers that have come in over the last 2 to 3 years. And if the buck stops with him, if he's the sporting director, then he's got a bit of a cheek, sort of saying, "I want out because I'm fed up with what's going on in the club." Surely he has to take some of that responsibility. But yeah, Monchi didn't have a great time at Roma, but obviously joined them with a great reputation. Overmars seems to be very well thought of at Ajax, so Arsenal will be a bit frustrated he's decided to stay there. But yeah, as an Arsenal fan, and certainly after the Sven experience, which I don't think was particularly successful either, I would, as an Arsenal fan, I would not be particularly excited at all about Zubizarreta. I can't really point to. You could say that maybe Kaleta Sarr will prove to have been a really great buy in the future, but aside from that, Luis Gustavo has done well, but I can't really think of any really great transfer that they've made. Even Balotelli, okay, he's come and he's done well in January, but the whole fact of him not coming in the summer was a bit of a farce as well. That element might not be down to Zubizarreta, that might be more down to Viola on one side and Neville on the other, and more financial issues. But I can't think of any reason why a Marseille fan would look back at Zubizarreta's time there and say, yeah, that was a success.
Sort of looking back at Barcelona before that for Arsenal fans, yes, there's certain players that have come in under his stewardship, like Neymar and Luis Suarez, but I don't think he's necessarily the ones at the spearhead of those moves. But at the same time, they've had a couple of players like Marc-Andre Stegen was brought under his stewardship. They brought in Jordi Alba back at that time as well when he was in charge. But like Sanchez was signed under his reign, but then you look at other players like Alex Song, you look at Claudio Bravo, that didn't end particularly well. You look at some people that you might have forgotten were even there, like Douglas, Thomas Vermaelen barely played. Jeremy Mathieu was a strange signing for them, at least in terms of looking for centre-back. So in a sense, Pierre-Paul, it's looking sort of mainly on his reign while he's been at Marseille. I suppose the excuse that Arsenal fans were trying to look at themselves is he has been a little bit hamstrung by the budgeting issues he had in his first couple of years, but now he has had a little bit more to spend in, and you look at the signings, especially maybe they've made this summer and this January, there's not a great deal of inspiration there. I mean, a lot of players, they've brought in a lot of old players, a lot of experienced players, but it's difficult to see where they're getting real contributors from.
Yeah, I agree. I would be a little bit concerned about Arsenal showing interest for him. I mean, because in a club like Barcelona, he's not the only one making decisions with regards to transfers. That's certain. They certainly have a whole team and a number of opinions and different kind of authorities having a say on this. And he probably, I think he made himself a name working with that team, but it's not, the signings they make don't necessarily come from him specifically. At Marseille, it's a little bit complicated as well, because he's also been caught in between, a number of strong personalities, whether it's Rudy Garcia, the manager, or the president, the acting president, Jacques-Henri Hérault, or the owner, who's also quite involved, Frank McCourt. And everybody has their say, everybody has their opinions in terms of transfers, and as you say, there's budgeting difficulties, and they struggle to agree amongst each other, and to agree with other clubs as well, as we saw with the whole Balotelli transfer saga, and the kind of strange failed negotiations with the directors of Nice. And it seems to me that Arsenal have very much been trying to tap into the kind of big names in terms of sporting directors, which I'm not sure if that is necessarily the most calculated way of approaching the subject, because as you said, they first had Sven Mislintat for 1 year, who's now gone, tried to get Monchi to replace him, and now looking at Zuida Zareta, and these are all, I think, for a sporting director, for guys like them to be famous, it also comes from a will of being famous and of getting their name out there. And I'm sure there's a number of competent people out there who could do work of similar quality or better, and who we don't necessarily know. And I'm not quite sure why Arsenal is focusing on the big names specifically.
Yeah, it's always an interesting balancing act, because, like you say, do you go for the big name? Do you go for the sort of smaller one? Do you maybe go for someone who's been a manager before? Do you go someone that's had a little experience or had a good link with the club? It's such a awkward sort of one to try and roll for. I think that if they do bring in someone like Zubizarreta, I think you need someone underneath him, like you're saying there, Pierre-Paul, someone associated with the club, someone with a little bit less experience maybe in terms of managing those kind of roles, but someone who can learn and is a bit younger and knows the philosophy of the club and has a bit more of that sort of style, much like I suppose a Bayern Munich sort of running that sort of way. Do something like that to give them a bit, but I don't see why the interest in Zubizarreta is there, and I'm pretty sure Jez will back that to the moon, really, because now they've also been. Yeah, go ahead.
I just also think if you take the Monkey example or the Overmars example, I think it's probably fair to sort of compare Arsenal in a way to a Sevilla, with all due respect to Arsenal, to a Sevilla or a Roma or an Ajax. Barcelona. They can look at the Suarez's and the Neymars and sort of click their fingers and get anyone they want. The fact is that Arsenal can't at the moment. And again, they're probably a bigger draw than Marseille, but Marseille is still a draw as a club. And so I think Arsenal should be looking at the Marseille Zubizarreta rather than the Barcelona Zubizarreta, and I think that should be ringing alarm bells.
Yeah, it was that is maybe sort of the force they want to do, because you have to take some of these things with a little pinch of salt. But before we come on to our sort of Ligue 1 snapshots, I do want to chat about Saint-Etienne, who did win tonight. I know we've not really been on TV to watch, unfortunately, Jess, so we've not really been able to catch it, but a great win for them. And much like we mentioned on Thursday, they looked embattled and out of it really a couple of weeks ago after an indifferent sort of February and early March. But 2 victories and results going their way elsewhere has really put them back in the fight. They're in 4th. They've got a couple of games coming up against Amiens and against Bordeaux, who played each other at the weekend, and neither looked particularly happy about it or talented about it. So it's a great chance for them to try and build a little bit of a lead now, with Marseille having some other tough games coming up if they are playing much like they did the weekend. This is a great chance for Les Verts to get themselves back into Europe now.
Yeah, and I caught a little bit, and the last goal the winner was a little bit controversial, but I think it was given for offside, and then VAR reversed. It was reversed on VAR quite rightly. It was actually, although he was sort of all by himself on the 6-yard line, it was a clever finish by Beric, and yeah, I think they've recovered from those blows of those sort of those late defeats and the season-ending injuries for a couple of the players, they're gradually bedding in 2 or 3 very talented young players as well. And on paper, and especially with teams like, I think Marseille slipping up and Nice always going to drop points by virtue of the fact that they're not scoring enough. They should be able to challenge certainly for a Europa League spot. And whereas a lot of their players are sort of, I think they blow hot and cold, people like Hanuma, Cabella, Kazri, I think that the fact that they've got enough of them, you'd hope that at least 1 or 2 of them are going to turn up each match to do the business. And they don't have the hardest of run-ins at all. So, yeah, I think it's very much in their hands. I do feel like, although they still got a lot to play for, it feels like at Marseille everyone's just thinking, I can't wait for this season to be over and we can sort everything out in the summer. As I said, Nice, in a way, similarly, kind of, let's just get to the summer unscathed and just do everything we can to bring in a striker who can actually score goals. So I think Saint-Etienne are sort of better set up to push for that 4th spot than any of their rivals. I'm sort of disrespecting us by ignoring them a little bit, but I think Saint-Etienne have got more about them than us as well. And I think that they should be making that 4th spot theirs. And if they don't, I think it would be more them throwing it away than anyone sort of doing anything special to overtake them.
Yeah, and Pierre-Paul, Reims will be the team that will be chasing them. Obviously, they'll play on Wednesday night, so we'll talk a little bit more about them on our preview show with Guingamp playing Montpellier as well. So it's interesting to think that both of them will be fighting. But in the case of Reims, over the sort of turn of the year, they've been even more exciting rather than defensive now. And if anything, it's a great opportunity for them. Although at the same time, looking at their running, at least anyway, they obviously play Strasbourg on Wednesday in their game in hand, but there's games against Lille, against Monaco, against Saint-Etienne themselves. They've got PSG in the last game of the season as well, which could be a gimme if PSG have sort of already sent half of their squad on holiday by that point, at least anyway. But at the same time, it's going to be a tough run in, but they have an outsider's chance at least. Yeah, certainly. And I mean, it's really hard to judge, how far they can go, because it's crazy seeing the performance levels that they've attained this season. I mean, if you compare it to when I saw them in Ligue 2 last year, they were good, but let's say 2 years ago, it was kind of dreadful. It's incredible how far they've gone in just 2 years under the manager David Guillon. And yeah, as you said, they added an important offensive element to their game around January. In the first half of the season, they were very strong defensively. They had a series of 0-0 draws, and they were keeping clean sheets a lot, which is a little bit less of the case now. But they have been scoring a lot more. They scored 4 at Montpellier. They scored 2 against Marseille, 4 at Toulouse. That was in the Coupe, though. And, they brought in some interesting players at the front. Albert Zanelli is, he's become an instant hit with the fans. He's the Kosovan international he had the most assists in the Dutch league in the first half of the season before he came to Reims. So that was quite impressive for Reims to snatch a player like him. And as you say, my 2 concerns would be the fixtures, the opponents they face, because they've avoided some of the bigger teams so far in the return fixtures. Also, they'll be playing twice they're playing on Wednesday, and then they're playing on Sunday. Wednesday against Strasbourg, Sunday against Lille. And I think sometimes they struggle when they have two matches so close to one another, when they don't have a full week between 2 matches. But Strasbourg have extra time in their legs after the cup final from Saturday, whereas Reims didn't play this weekend. So I think they can get a result there. Lille would be a little tougher, possibly. Yeah, and if you want to keep up with all your Arbors and A-League content, just see when Jez sends any links to me over the, over the point. Keep an eye on my timeline because I get plenty of them from him. Let's go on to our Ligue 1 snapshots to finish off then, and I'll start with yourself, Jez, this evening. So, what's the story in French football that we've not talked about tonight that everyone at home should hear about?
Can I be cheeky and make it a Ligue 2 snapshot?
Go ahead.
I'm being parochial again. I started with Brighton, so I'll finish with Metz. They had a sort of top of the table clash against Lorient, who started the match in third place. Bizarrely, it was a Sunday lunchtime kickoff, which is a bit weird for Ligue 2, but a really impressive 2-1 win for Metz. Probably much more comfortable than the score suggested, which is even more impressive when you consider that Nguet got sent off quite early, so they played about an hour with 10 men. They're now, I think from memory, 8 clear from second and 11 clear of third. They only need probably 3 more wins to be assured of Ligue 1, of going up to Ligue 1. And obviously I'm biased, but yeah, I think they've been, although not always the performances, their solidity and the kind of team spirit that Antonetti has built has been really impressive. And if they can maintain that and perhaps bring in 1 or 2 quality players, maybe they've got a fighting chance of actually staying in Ligue 1 for once.
No, that's not a problem. Bring back that derby against Strasbourg that we enjoyed last season. Let's have a couple more of those. It'd be great to see them back in the league. Pierre-Paul, what's your snapshot for this week?
Well, I'm also going to part ways with Ligue 1, and I'm going to talk rather about the women's first division because something quite exceptional happened this weekend. Lyon actually dropped points. It's the first time they drop points against a team that isn't PSG since May of 2016, so almost in 3 years. They drew 1-1 with Fleury, which is a sort of mid-table team. Maybe they were a little bit tired after their Champions League fixture against Wolfsburg last week. And the title race is on because PSG won against Rodez, who are last in the league, 3-0. And in 2 weeks, this week they go off on international break. France play Japan and Denmark. And then the week after that, Lyon play against Paris. They are tied on points. It's the third last match of the season in the league. So essentially whoever wins that match is going to be champion. Both teams are undefeated so far in the league. And if it's a draw, Lyon will almost certainly be champion as well because their goal difference is much higher than Paris's.
And that's something exciting to look forward to. French women's football is always have a good standard as well. My Liga snapshot, I'm sure many fans will want to hear about this tonight, really. That the reports, at least anyway, nothing confirmed as of yet, that Ander Herrera has signed a pre-contract agreement with Paris Saint-Germain. It almost seemed like, initially at least anyway, it was a ploy to sign a new contract at Manchester United. Supposedly his wage demands are pretty high for the standard. It's a difficult one, really. I think he'd be a really great squad player for Paris Saint-Germain. He's a great squad player for Manchester United, for one thing, even though he's in the main 3 at the moment. Many would say that it's a place where they could possibly improve, but he's a great worker. He's someone that puts in a shift, even if he does annoy opposition fans and opposition players sometimes, maybe is the best way of putting it, with some of his antics, some of his bits. But should he join Paris Saint-Germain, he reminds me of something I've mentioned a few times about players that add to these champions winning teams, these teams that need a player like Ander Herrera that you can ask anything of and he'll perform it to the most of his ability at least and give you a consistent performance, a 7 out of 10 most times. I'm thinking of a modern era, well, at least in modern era, I'm thinking of James Milner at Liverpool. I always point back to Park Ji-sung at Manchester United, a man that you could just ask to do a job and he'll do that for you, much like he did that marking job on Eden Hazard last season for Manchester United when they needed a result. He marked him out of the game. He's that kind of player. Whether he's at the standard to be a permanent fixture in the regular starting lineup of Paris Saint-Germain is another in question entirely, given the other talent they've been looking for. And I'm pretty certain if he does come in, he'll be not the only player Paris Saint-Germain will bring in the midfield, but should he join, he'll be an exciting addition to Ligue 1 for a number of reasons, not just because of his his ability on the ball, but also his ability to stir things up is maybe the best way of putting it, more than anything. That's all that we have time for this evening, at least. My thanks to Jez, Pierre-Paul, and all of you listening at home. Do join us for the preview show that will be back on Thursday, and the main show will be back here at the same time, same place next week. A bientôt, and goodbye.